A box joint or a finger joint is often cut with a router or a table saw, but today we're going to be cutting it by hand. When gluing something that is protruding, you've got to be very careful. Welcome to Woodworking Wisdom with me, Evelegh, where we're going to be cutting a box joint. The tools you'll need are a dovetail saw, a bevel edge chisel set, a mallet, a fret saw, a marking gauge, a square, a marking knife, a rule, and a pencil. A box joint or a finger joint is often cut with a router or a table saw, but today we're going to be cutting it by hand. These are most commonly used for boxes, for drawers and cabinets. So it's very similar to a dovetail but without those angled walls. So the first thing we want to do is mark out, let's call them the tails. So I'm going to head over to the bench vise. The board I have here is 10 centimeters wide. So I can get, if I want 2 centimeter tails, I can get 3. So I'm going to mark every 2 centimeters. Use my square to draw those lines. And I'm just going to mark this waist here so I know which side of the line I want to cut on. Now I want these fingers to protrude past the board because I want to add a chamfer on at the end. I think that'll look nice. So I'm going to set my marking gauge to about 2 centimeters past the thickness of the board. Okay. And I'm just going to carry on these lines with the square down the front of the board so then I know where to draw the marking gauge line. I like only marking the waist. If you wanted to, you could mark all the way around the board. That would be quicker, but then you have a lot of material to remove at the end to try and remove that marking gauge line. So this is going to be my show face. Make sure everything's locked in place. I'm just going to mark the waist in between these tails, rolling the wheel up to that line, making sure I don't overshoot. And because the back of the joint is going to be in the inside corner, I can mark this line down the full length of it. Okay, I'm not going to do the other board yet because I, again, just want to mark the waist. So I'm going to go back to the bench vise, use my dovetail saw to remove this waist. If you're not comfortable cutting just on either side of the line, you can cut 1 millimeter away and then pare back with a chisel. But I'm going to cut just on the waist side of that line. Okay, now I'm going to use a fret saw to hog out this material quickly. Now a fret saw is not as accurate as a dovetail saw, so I am cutting 1mm away from the line, and I'm going to chisel back to it after. Okay. So now I'm going to clamp this to the workbench and use a chisel to clean up that shoulder. So now these fingers are done. I'm going to mark the other side very much like you would do a dovetail. So I'm just going to get a plane and put this board in the vise at the same height. Then I'm going to use my largest chisel to help align the boards. And then with my marking knife, I'm going to scribe those fingers onto the other board. Okay, now I'm going to mark the waist, so remember what side of the line to cut on. Like before, I'm going to use my square to carry on those lines down. That's going to help me cut straight. Now on the back, I'm going to run the marking gauge the full width again. And on this side, because we're removing the two end pieces, I'm also going to mark the edges. Now I'm going to mark the waist, which is the alternate fingers from the other board, so the middle one and the two outside ones. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the vise, use my dovetail saw again, and remove that waist. Now I'm going to remove the outside pieces, cutting 1mm away from the edge. Because I'm going to pare that back with chisels. And I'm going to remove the center with the fret saw. Okay, like the other board, I'm going to clamp this to the workbench and chisel that out again. So I've added a slight undercut on the shoulders to make sure there's no high spots that will prevent the joint from seating properly. It's time to give it a test. Okay, I think that looks really nice. Now I've left these fingers protruding because I think it's going to look quite cool if I had a chamfer on each of these. So this isn't essential, but I'm going to get a block plane and I'm just going to add a little chamfer around all the fingers. And the inside ones, I'll have to use a chisel for the chamfer. I think that is going to make the joint look so much nicer. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is take the joint apart, add some glue, and that is the joint complete. So when gluing something that is protruding, you've got to be very careful, because if you coat everything with glue, then you're going to get a lot of glue squeeze out on the show face, which is not good. So normally when you're doing something like this, you would want to pre-finish the panels. So if there's any squeeze out, you can just quickly wipe it off and it won't affect the final result. But because this isn't pre-finished, I'm just going to add small dabs of glue. So hopefully I won't get any squeeze out on the show face and it's only going to come out inside the joint. Okay, so you don't need a ton of glue. Make sure your show faces are on the outside. Okay, so I'm very happy with that, nice and tight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this to set overnight, and then we'll come back to see what it looks like in the morning. So that is the box joint. I highly recommend protruding the fingers and adding a little chamfer. I think that makes a huge difference. I'm going to be using these a lot more in my furniture. So I hope you enjoyed this joint. I hope you learned something. Remember to like, share and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.